Sir, don't get on that plane. The little girl's voice was so small that the wind almost stole it. But Ethan Whitmore heard enough to stop with one polished shoe on the jet stair. Behind him, the engines hummed, the runway lights blinked awake, and his chief engineer gave a careful smile. She's confused, Mr. Whitmore. But the child kept staring at the door. It clicked wrong, she whispered. 20 minutes earlier, nobody at Whitmore Field was looking at Maya Brooks. That was how it usually was. Rich people crossed the private terminal beneath warm glass lights, smelling of leather bags and expensive cologne, while Maya stayed near the service wall with a trash liner in one hand and her mother's folded cleaning rag in the other. The late Florida sun had turned the runway copper, shining against the white body of Ethan Whitmore's Gulfstream like something too clean to belong on Earth. Men in dark suits moved around it with clipboards and earpieces. A black SUV idled near the hangar. Somewhere behind the terminal doors, someone laughed into a phone about Dallas, board votes, and how Mr. Whitmore did not tolerate delays. Maya did not care about any of that. Her sneakers were too tight. Her hoodie had a bleach spot on the sleeve. Her stomach had been empty since lunch, except for the orange crackers her mother had slipped into her palm during break. She was trying to be quiet because Denise Brooks had already warned her twice. Baby, stay where the cameras can see you and don't talk to anybody important. Important meant the men who never looked at Denise unless something was dirty. Important meant the people who could decide, with one sentence, whether Maya's mother still had night work by Friday. Maya stood still beside a yellow mop bucket and listened. That was what her father had taught her before he died, before the apartment got smaller, before her mother started cleaning hangers under fluorescent lights that buzzed all night. Raymond Brooks used to say machines had manners. A safe latch had weight. A sealed door had patience. A false lock was too quick, too eager, like a person answering before they understood the question. Maya still remembered his hand. Over hers, guiding her palm against a cold aircraft door at a county airfield in Georgia. Hear it with your bones, May, he had told her. The first click catches. The second one tells the truth. Across the tarmac, Caleb Rourke, Whitmore's chief engineer, stood by the jet door with a silver maintenance tablet tucked under his arm. He looked calm, clean, respected. His gray hair barely moved in the wind. Ethan Whitmore came out of the private terminal surrounded by power. One lawyer, two security men, a flight attendant in Navy heels, and the kind of silence that formed around people everyone was paid not to interrupt. Ethan was taller than Maya expected, with a hard face and tired eyes. Not old, but worn in a way money could not polish. He paused at the bottom of the stairs while Caleb stepped forward. Full clearance, sir. Door calibration completed. Cabin pressure test passed. She's ready. Ethan gave a short nod. $8 million in repairs, Maya had heard one of the men say earlier, as if the number itself could hold the plane together. The door began to close. Maya's eyes lifted. The metal arm drew inward. The seal met the frame. The latch engaged. Click. Maya waited. The second sound never came. Her fingers tightened around the cleaning rag. The flight attendant smiled. The lawyer checked his watch. Caleb turned away too fast. Maya took one step forward, then another. Denise saw her and froze beside the service cart. Maya, she warned, barely above a breath. But Maya was already moving. A security guard shifted to block her, yet she slipped past the edge of his jacket and reached the bottom of the stairs just as Ethan placed his hand on the chrome rail. She caught the sleeve of his suit with two fingers, not pulling hard, only enough to make him feel the weight of a child who had no permission to touch him. Ethan looked down, irritation crossing his face before he could hide it. Who are you? Caleb was already walking toward them. Apologies, Mr. Whitmore. She's with the cleaning staff. The words landed like a stain. Maya let go of the sleeve but did not step back. Sir, she said, don't get on that plane. The runway seemed to quiet around her. Ethan stared at her for 1 second, then at Denise, who had gone pale near the mop bucket. That's a serious thing to say, he said, his voice low. Maya nodded once. Yes, sir. Then you better know what you heard. Maya looked past him to the closed jet door, to the narrow access panel near the hinge line, to the place where a thin black shadow sat wrong inside the seam. She did not explain everything. Not yet. She only said, "It clicked once." Caleb gave a soft laugh, the kind adults used when they wanted a child to disappear without making a scene. "Aircraft doors make all kinds of sounds, sweetheart." Maya finally looked at him. "Not that one." For the first time, Ethan did not move. It was almost nothing, just a small pause in his hand on the rail, a hesitation too brief for anyone else to count. Then a gust of wind lifted the corner of Caleb's clipboard, and Maya saw what had been hidden beneath it. A fresh smear of black grease on his thumb, shaped exactly like the mark inside the access panel. The smear of black grease on Caleb Rourke's thumb should not have meant anything. Men who worked around aircraft carried oil on their hands the way cooks carried flour, the way janitors carried the faint sharp smell of bleach. But Caleb was not supposed to have touched that panel. Not after telling everyone it had been sealed that morning. Ethan Whitmore saw the mark, then looked away so quickly no one could accuse him of noticing. That was how powerful men survived rooms full of liars. They did not react first. They remembered. "Do you know what kind of aircraft this is?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet enough that the wind nearly took it. Maya shook her head. "No, sir." Caleb smiled again, but it had become thinner at the edges. "It's a Gulfstream G650ER, he said, bending slightly toward her as if the name itself should send her back behind the mop bucket. "Certified, inspected, and maintained by people who have spent their lives around aircraft." He turned to Ethan. $8 million in structural repair, seal replacement, door calibration, avionics review, full cabin pressure testing. Every system passed. The lawyer beside Ethan shifted his leather briefcase from one hand to the other. "Sir, Dallas is expecting you in under 2 hours." The words were ordinary. The meaning was not. If Ethan missed the board vote, Victor Whitmore could force a delay, and a delay could become a challenge, and a challenge could become a public wound across the company Ethan had built after his brother's funeral. Ethan glanced at the jet door. Smooth white paint, chrome handle. The little green indicator light near the frame glowed as if nothing in the world was wrong. "Machines don't care about children's guesses," Caleb said softly. Maya looked down at her shoes. For a second, Denise thought she would finally step back. Instead, the child lifted her eyes and said, "My daddy said machines don't lie. People make them lie." No one spoke. A small service cart rolled somewhere behind the hangar, one bad wheel clicking against the concrete in a dull rhythm. Inside the private terminal, a television over the coffee bar played the evening news with the sound muted. A woman in a Navy uniform stirred sugar into a paper cup, the plastic spoon tapping twice against the rim before she stopped and looked over. Ethan's phone vibrated in his coat pocket. He did not check it. "Your father worked on aircraft?" he asked. "A long time ago," Maya said. Denise's face changed just a little, the way faces change when an old bill comes in the mail. Caleb noticed it too. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, still calm. "I'm sure her family has a story. Everyone around an airport does." Then he lowered his voice. "Not enough. With respect, sir, this is exactly how liability begins. A frightened child, an emotional parent, a billionaire with cameras nearby." Ethan looked toward the security dome above the hangar door. Its red recording light blinked steadily. "Cameras running?" he asked. One of the security men touched his earpiece. "Yes, sir." Caleb answered too fast. "Exterior only. The door work was done inside Bay 3 earlier." Maya turned her head. "No, it wasn't." Caleb's eyes moved to her. "Excuse me?" "The door was open out here," she said. "At 6:12. The lawyer frowned. "How do you know the time?" Maya reached into the front pocket of her hoodie and pulled out her mother's cracked old phone. Mom's alarm went off for her second shift. I was standing by the vending machine. The phone screen lit up with a low battery warning. Beneath it was a paused voice memo, only 3 seconds long, accidentally recorded when she had shoved the phone away. Ethan leaned slightly closer but did not take it. Caleb's smile disappeared completely. On the tiny waveform, just before the recording ended, There were two sounds. One heavy metallic click, and then Caleb's voice, low and flat, saying, "No, leave the second latch out until he boards." Caleb moved before Ethan did. It was not a lunge, not anything dramatic enough for security to name. He simply stepped closer and extended his hand toward the cracked phone, palm open, professional concern arranged across his face. "That sounds like a partial recording," he said. "Wind, machinery, a child misunderstanding maintenance language. Let me review it properly." Maya pulled the phone back against her chest. Denise whispered, "Baby," but there was no command in it anymore, only fear. Ethan watched the child's fingers close around the cracked screen. Her knuckles were small, dry from cold air and cleaning chemicals, but they did not loosen. "No, sir," Maya said. "My daddy said if somebody asks for proof too fast, don't hand it to them." Caleb's jaw tightened, then relaxed so quickly most people would have missed it. Ethan did not. "Open the access panel," Ethan said. Caleb turned his head slowly. "Mr. Whitmore, I can, but if we break clearance now, the aircraft will require a reset and another sign-off. That could take an hour." The lawyer made a quiet sound in his throat. The board vote hung over them like weather. Ethan slid one hand into his coat pocket and finally looked at his phone. 3 missed calls from Dallas. 1 text from Victor Whitmore. Don't let a delay hand them an excuse. Ethan locked the screen without answering. "Open it." Caleb nodded once, too politely, and took a tool from a technician. The panel screws came out one by one, each tiny turn loud in the stillness. Maya stood beside Denise, watching Caleb's thumb. The black grease had been wiped away, but not completely. A crescent of it remained under his nail. When the panel loosened, Caleb angled his body between the opening and the others. "Nothing unusual," he said almost immediately. Maya frowned. She had not even seen inside yet. That was the mistake. "You didn't look," she said. Caleb turned. "Excuse me? You said nothing unusual before you looked." The security guard nearest Ethan glanced up. Ethan's face did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted, like a light being switched on in a room nobody was supposed to enter. "Step aside," he said. Caleb held still for 1 heartbeat, then moved. Inside the access cavity, wires ran in neat bundles, clipped and labeled. To Ethan, it looked like a language written by machines. To Maya, it looked like a sentence with 1 word crooked. She pointed, not touching. That black clip. A small plastic fastener pressed a thin wire at an odd angle, forcing it against the sensor housing. Caleb exhaled through his nose. "Temporary hold down. Common during inspection." Maya shook her head. "Then why is the tag missing?" A technician leaned in with a flashlight. "What tag?" Maya pointed to the empty pinhole near the clip. "Red paper tag. My dad used those when something wasn't finished. If it's temporary, it has to tell people." The technician's expression faltered. Caleb looked at him once, a warning disguised as a glance. Then, from inside his tablet case, Caleb's phone buzzed. He pressed the side button fast, but not before the screen lit against the dimming runway. Ethan saw only 3 words from an unknown number before the message vanished. "Is he on board?" The wind moved across the concrete. Nobody spoke. Maya looked from the dead screen to the open panel, and in that silence, the little black clip no longer looked temporary at all. By the time they moved Maya and Denise inside the private terminal, the sky over Whitmore Field had turned the color of bruised copper. The runway lights glowed through the glass wall, clean and blue and far away, while the airport lounge wrapped everything in money. Cream leather chairs, dark walnut tables, a wall of framed aviation awards, bottled water in glass instead of plastic, and a silent television showing stock numbers at the bottom of the screen. Maya stood near the service entrance because no one had offered her a seat. Denise stood beside her, still in her gray cleaning uniform, the name patch curling at one corner. Caleb had gone quiet in the way careful men went quiet when they were rebuilding a story. Ethan remained near the window, one hand in his pocket, watching the plane without looking like he was watching anyone. His lawyer, Marjorie Vale, stepped forward with a calm smile that did not reach her eyes. Mr. Whitmore, with respect, we need to contain this properly. The word contain seemed to land on Maya before it landed on the room. Marjorie turned to Denise. Mrs. Brooks, nobody is accusing your daughter of wrongdoing. But she entered a restricted flight zone, interfered with a scheduled departure, and recorded personnel without authorization. Denise's lips parted, then closed. She knew how people with polished shoes made danger sound like paperwork. A security supervisor folded his hands in front of him. For everyone's safety, we should collect the device and escort them out until we know what this is. Maya tightened both hands around the cracked phone. Caleb looked at Ethan then, not at Maya. That would be the cleanest option, sir. We can preserve chain of command, reset the panel, and have an independent review after Dallas. After Dallas. Two soft words trying to bury a hard thing. Marjorie nodded. Exactly. Nothing is being ignored. We're simply preventing panic based on an incomplete recording and a child's interpretation. She said child gently, but it made Maya feel smaller than if she had shouted. The flight attendant set a cup of coffee on a side table. The spoon inside tapped once against porcelain, a tiny bright sound in the expensive silence. Ethan looked at the cup, then at Maya's shoes, scuffed white at the toes from concrete. He saw Denise's hand hover behind her daughter's shoulder, wanting to protect her, but afraid protection itself might cost them rent. Maya, Marjorie said, crouching just enough to seem kind. If you hand over the phone, we can make sure nothing gets lost. Maya looked at her. Things get lost when grown-ups hold them. The room went still. Caleb gave a quiet breath, almost amused. That's not fair. Maya's voice stayed small. Neither is calling it safety when you mean quiet. Ethan's eyes lifted. For a moment he saw not a child making trouble, but a child standing in a room built to make her doubt her own ears. Caleb stepped toward the coffee table and placed his tablet down, screen facing up, showing the maintenance clearance with green check marks beside every line. Mr. Whitmore, this is the official record. Then his phone buzzed again inside his jacket. He ignored it, smiling. But Maya saw the reflection in the dark window behind him, just bright enough to read the caller name he had tried to hide. Victor W. The reflection of Victor W. stayed in the dark glass for less than a second, but Ethan saw Maya see it. That mattered. Children often stared when they were frightened. Maya did not stare. She measured. She held the cracked phone to her chest, lowered her eyes, and said nothing, as if silence itself had become a place to hide something alive. Caleb slid his phone deeper into his jacket and gave a careful smile. Family keeps calling when a flight gets delayed, he said lightly. You know how Mr. Whitmore's board is. Ethan did know. He knew Victor's expensive patience, his polished concern, the way he could make a threat sound like advice. Ethan also knew Caleb had never called Victor by his first name in front of staff. Not once in 11 years. We'll return to the aircraft, Ethan said. Marjorie turned sharply. Ethan, that may not be wise. 10 minutes, he said. His voice was quiet, but the room obeyed it. Outside, the air had cooled. The private jet stood under floodlights now, no longer beautiful, just pale and waiting. Maya walked beside Denise, still clutching the phone, but her eyes were on the ground near the mobile stairs. What are you looking for? Ethan asked. The thing that made it sound wrong, she said. Caleb's mouth tightened. Mr. Whitmore, with respect, loose debris near aircraft is common during maintenance. Maya stopped near the left wheel of the stair unit. The rubber tire had left a half-moon mark. On the concrete, beside it, caught in a thin line of oil and dust, something no bigger than a broken pencil tip glinted beneath the blue runway light. Caleb saw it at the same moment she did. Don't touch that. His voice came out too fast. Maya froze, then reached slowly into her mother's cleaning apron and pulled out a folded white rag. I won't touch it, she said. She crouched down and picked the object up through the cloth, careful, almost ceremonial, the way her father had once taught her to pick up screws from under an engine cowling. It was a short piece of metal, narrow, dark with fresh grease, one end sheared clean and the other scratched raw. Ethan held out his hand. Maya hesitated. She looked first at Caleb, then at Marjorie, then at her mother. Denise gave the smallest nod. Maya placed the rag in Ethan's palm. The metal was heavier than he expected. Cold, ugly, real. Near the broken edge, stamped so small he almost missed it, were 4 characters. WJ-47. Ethan did not speak. He turned the piece once, and the runway lights caught the number again. Something moved behind his eyes, not understanding yet, but recognition without a name. 11 years earlier, in a conference room after his brother Nathan's crash, he had seen a photograph of wreckage on a table. There had been numbers on fragments. He had not looked long. Grief had made cowardice feel like survival. That part doesn't prove anything, Caleb said. It could be scrap from the repair. Ethan looked at him. Then why did you tell her not to touch it before you knew what it was? Caleb's face did not fall apart. Men like him knew better. But the warmth left it, and that was enough. Ethan closed his fingers around the rag, and for the first time that night, he did not look at the plane when he spoke. He looked at Caleb. Open the door records. Open the door records, Ethan said again, but not louder. That was what made Caleb hesitate. Anger could be managed. Panic could be denied. This calm was harder to read. Marjorie stepped closer, lowering her voice. Ethan, if you're considering an internal review, we should move this into council privilege. Ethan looked at her only long enough to answer. Then put it there. She understood at once. Her expression changed from inconvenience to calculation, and within seconds she was on her phone, asking Whitmore Legal to mirror every maintenance file, every access log, every camera angle from Bay 3, the ramp, and the private lounge. Caleb watched her, but Ethan did not watch Caleb. He had learned long ago that guilty men became careful when they felt observed. Instead, Ethan turned to the cockpit and climbed the steps alone. Inside, the cabin smelled of leather, chilled air, and the faint citrus polish used by flight crews who knew billionaires noticed everything except what mattered. The green message still glowed on the panel near the flight deck. Cabin door locked. Ethan stared at it while holding the rag-wrapped metal in his palm. The plane was telling him one thing. The child had told him another. Behind him, Maya stood just outside the cabin threshold, not stepping onto the carpet until invited. You can come in, Ethan said. She shook her head. My shoes are dirty. Something in him tightened. He thought of how many executives had walked mud into his company and been welcomed with champagne. The plane is grounded, he said. Your shoes won't hurt it. Maya came in slowly. Denise remained at the bottom of the stairs, arms folded around herself, looking at every uniform as if one of them might turn into a pink slip. Ethan saw it. Your mother's job is protected tonight, he said. Maya looked at him then, really looked. Not just tonight. It was not a demand. It was smaller and heavier than that. Ethan nodded once. Not just tonight. The cabin went quiet. Outside, rain began to tap against the oval windows, soft at first, then steady, each drop sliding down the glass and bending the runway lights into blue streaks. From somewhere near the galley came the tiny sound of a metal spoon shifting inside a cup left behind by the flight attendant. For a few seconds, it was almost an ordinary delay. Then Marjorie's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen, then up at Ethan. We have a problem. He stepped down from the cockpit. Camera. Bay 3 footage is intact, she said. Ramp footage is intact. She paused. But the exterior door camera is missing exactly 7 minutes. From 6:09 to 6:16. Maya's cracked phone was still in her hands. My mom's alarm was 6:12, she said softly. Ethan turned toward Caleb. Caleb had not moved, but his face had settled into something too blank. System outages happen, he said, especially after hangar maintenance. Marjorie looked down at her tablet. The outage was manually tagged as routine privacy masking. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Who approved it? Marjorie did not answer right away. That delay told him more than her words could have. Caleb's clearance approved it, she said. But the override request came from an executive account. Rain traced the window beside Ethan's shoulder. He looked at Caleb, the man who had signed his aircraft safe, the man who had stood beside him after Nathan's funeral, the man who had spoken softly about grief and systems and unavoidable failure. For 11 years, Ethan had mistaken proximity for loyalty. Now, with a child's voice memo, a missing 7 minutes, and a broken part in his hand, he realized he had not been looking at his most trusted engineer. He had been looking past him. Ethan did not accuse Caleb. He did something colder. He asked him to help. "Walk me through it," Ethan said, standing beside the open cabin door with the rag-wrapped fragment still in his palm. "For my own understanding." Caleb's eyes moved once toward Marjorie's tablet, where the missing 7 minutes sat like a hole in the evening, then back to Ethan. "Of course." His voice was steady, but the smoothness had begun to wear thin. "The door closes. Primary latch catches. Secondary latch engages. Sensor confirms lock. The cockpit receives the signal." "And if the secondary latch does not engage?" Ethan asked. "The cockpit warns the crew. Unless the sensor is held closed," Maya said. No one had asked her. She said it anyway. Caleb turned slowly, polite but sharp. "That is a very specific thing for a child to say." Maya looked at the open panel. "It's what the wire looked like." Ethan glanced toward the security supervisor. "Is that camera recording?" A small red light blinked above the lounge doorway. "Yes, sir." Caleb noticed it then. His hand drifted toward his jacket pocket, where his phone had been buzzing on and off for the past 3 minutes. He did not touch it. That was the first sign he understood the room had changed. Ethan placed the broken WJ-47 fragment on a folded white napkin on the coffee table between them. Beside it, Marjorie set the tablet with the cockpit status screen mirrored from the jet. Cabin door locked. Green. Calm. Lying. "Let's do a simple test," Ethan said. "Nothing dramatic. No accusations." Caleb's mouth made a shape close to a smile. "A test. You said the fragment could be scrapped from repair. You said the aircraft would have caught any real issue before taxi. So show us." The room held its breath. Outside the glass, rain ran down in long silver lines. A glass of water sat untouched near the edge of the table, tiny rings of condensation widening beneath it. Caleb looked at the fragment. "Show you what?" Ethan's voice remained mild. "Open the door fully. Remove the temporary hold-down you mentioned. Then close the door exactly as it would have been closed for departure." Caleb did not move. The silence stretched too long. Maya's eyes dropped to his right hand. His thumb rubbed once against his index finger, the same motion people made when trying to erase grease that was no longer there. "If it's temporary," Maya said softly, "it should come off easy." Caleb looked at her with something colder than annoyance now. "Your father teach you that too?" Denise inhaled sharply, but Maya did not look away. "Yes." Ethan turned his head. "Answer the test, Caleb." Caleb adjusted his cuffs. "Mr. Whitmore, performing an unauthorized manipulation of the door assembly without a maintenance crew present would be irresponsible." Marjorie lifted her tablet. "You are the maintenance authority on record. Then I am telling you it is not appropriate." Ethan nodded as if he had expected that. "So you won't remove the hold down." "I won't perform theater because a child heard a noise." The words were quiet, respectable, damning. Maya reached into her hoodie pocket and took out the cracked phone. Then listened to the noise. She did not play the voice memo from earlier. She opened a second file, one Ethan had not known existed. "I recorded doors sometimes," she said, embarrassed for the first time, "because I missed my dad." The audio crackled softly. A door closed in the distance. Click. A half-second later, deeper and heavier. Click. Maya stopped it. Then she played the 3-second clip from that evening. Click. Caleb's voice. No second latch. The difference was so small that half the room might have missed it. Ethan did not. He picked up the napkin with the WJ-47 fragment and held it out, not to Caleb, but to Maya. "Show me where it belongs." Maya stepped forward. For the first time all night, no security guard blocked her path. No lawyer corrected her tone. No engineer talked over her. She pointed to the open access panel and said, "There." Caleb looked at Ethan, then at the camera light, then at the child standing beside the billionaire with the evidence between them, and his face changed just enough to show he finally understood Maya Brooks was no longer standing in that room alone. Caleb understood the danger of the camera before anyone said the word evidence. He turned slightly away from it, not enough to look guilty, just enough to make his face harder to read. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, each word measured. "I have served this company for 11 years. I stood beside you after Nathan's accident. I would never put you in danger." Nathan's name landed in the room like a glass dropped on marble. Ethan did not blink, but something inside him recoiled. For a moment, the lounge, the rain, the jet, the child, all of it thinned around the old ache he had spent more than a decade training himself not to touch. Maya looked up at him. She had not known Nathan's name, but she knew what grief sounded like when adults tried to hide it. Her hand moved into her hoodie pocket, not to the phone this time, but to the little metal badge she carried everywhere. Raymond Brooks, junior mechanic. The badge was scratched, cheap, and bent at one corner. It did not belong on the walnut table beside tablets and leather folders, but Maya placed it there anyway. "My daddy wrote things down," she said. Her voice was barely above the thing. Denise closed her eyes. "Maya?" "He did," Maya said, and this time there was steel under the softness. "People said he talked too much, so he started writing." Marjorie looked at Ethan, waiting. Ethan nodded once. "Show me." Maya unlocked the cracked phone with shaking fingers and opened a saved photo album labeled Dad's Papers. The images were blurry at first. Pages laid on a kitchen table, a coffee mug at the edge, Maya's small hand holding down the corner. She scrolled until she found a photographed letterhead, "Whitmore Field Safety Concern." Beneath it was a report signed by Raymond Brooks, dated 11 years ago, 3 weeks before Nathan's crash. Secondary latch irregularity on WJ-47 assembly. Sensor can indicate locked if wire is compressed manually. Recommend immediate fleet inspection. Ethan took the phone slowly. The room made no sound except for rain on glass and the small buzz of Caleb's phone vibrating again, unanswered in his pocket. Marjorie's face went still. "Ethan," she said softly, "I need to pull the archive." She moved fast now. Not frantic. Legal fast. Her tablet connected to the company server, then to the old claims database, then to a sealed folder Ethan had not opened since the funeral. A progress circle spun on the screen. No one touched the water glass on the table. No one moved toward the door. Caleb's hand rested near his jacket, frozen halfway between dignity and escape. The file opened. Nathan Whitmore Fatal Incident Review. Page after page slid by until Marjorie stopped. Attached maintenance sign-off. Caleb Rourke. Cabin door status at takeoff. Locked. Component missing from wreckage. WJ-47 secondary latch pin. Prior safety complaint. Dismissed as not credible. Complainant. Raymond Brooks, junior mechanic. Ethan looked at the words, then at the fragment on the napkin, then at Maya's father's badge. The whole room seemed to tilt, not outward, but inward, into him. 11 years of grief. 11 years of trusting Caleb's quiet hand on his shoulder. 11 years of believing his brother died because machines sometimes failed and no one could have known. But someone had known. A poor mechanic had known. A little girl's father had known. And Ethan's company had stamped him not credible because his name was not on the boardroom wall. Ethan's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but no sound came. Maya did not look triumphant. She looked tired, the way children look when they have carried an adult truth too far. Caleb finally said, "Those files are old." Ethan set the phone down with care, as if anything rough might break the last piece of himself still standing. Then he placed the WJ-47 fragment beside Raymond Brooks's badge, looked at the blinking red camera light, and said calmly, "Call my attorney, and lock the hangar." The hangar did not erupt. That was what made it feel real. No one shouted. No one ran. The doors were locked. The jet was sealed. and the men who had spent years speaking in acronyms and clearances suddenly had to answer simple questions in front of people they used to ignore. By midnight, Caleb Rourke's access badge had been disabled. By morning, he was suspended pending investigation, his company phone taken by Whitmore Legal, his maintenance sign-offs frozen under federal review. Victor Whitmore tried to walk into the emergency board meeting with his usual calm, but Marjorie placed the printed transfer trail in front of every director before he could sit down. Payments routed through a Shell aviation consultant, timing matched to the 7 missing minutes, messages sent from his executive account, and one final request that made the room go silent. Confirm he is on board. Ethan stood at the end of the long boardroom table and did not raise his voice. My brother died under this company's name, he said. Raymond Brooks warned us. We buried the warning. Last night his daughter saved my life because she did what we failed to do. She listened. Victor lost his board seat before lunch. Caleb was escorted from Whitmore Field by investigators before sunset. The old Nathan Whitmore crash file was reopened, not as family grief, but as evidence. Raymond Brooks's safety complaint was restored to the record, his termination marked for independent review, and the words not credible were removed from the file with a formal apology signed by Ethan himself. But the part Maya remembered most did not happen under cameras. It happened 3 nights later, in the small apartment where the kitchen light flickered above a table with one uneven leg. Ethan came without a press team. Just Marjorie, a workers' rights attorney for Denise, and a folder that did not ask them to be grateful before it protected them. Denise's cleaning job was not saved. It was replaced with a paid safety liaison position at the airport, with benefits, training, and authority to report hazards without retaliation. The overdue rent was handled through a legal assistance fund, not a handout slipped across a table. Maya received a scholarship in her father's name, but Ethan made sure the first check went to an aviation safety program for children who lived near airports, the kind of children who heard engines through bedroom windows and knew the sky was not just for rich people. Denise cried only once, when Marjorie handed her the restored copy of Raymond's report. Maya sat beside her mother, knees tucked under the chair, the cracked phone lying on the table next to her father's bent badge. Ethan looked at that phone for a long time. You can have a new one, he said gently. Maya touched the broken screen with one finger. I know. Then she slid it back into her hoodie pocket. But this one remembered. Ethan had no answer. Outside, rain tapped softly against the kitchen window. Denise warmed soup on the stove, and for the first time all week, Maya ate without watching the door. Later, Ethan placed Raymond's badge in a small wooden frame beside the restored report. Not in a mansion hallway, not in a boardroom, but on the Brooks family's kitchen shelf, where Maya could see it every morning. Before he left, Maya walked him to the apartment door. She looked smaller there than she had in the hangar, but not weaker. Mr. Whitmore, she said. He turned. Maya held the old phone against her chest. Next time someone small tells you something sounds wrong, don't wait for proof to be kind. Ethan stood still, one hand on the doorknob, unable to speak for a moment that did not hurt the way silence used to. Then he nodded, because the truth had finally outrun the money, the titles, the locked doors, and the polished lies, and the little girl they tried to dismiss had been heard.